I destroyed my work project, I hate my company, and I hope I get fired. I've worked at a company for 2 years. In that time, I've gone from an incredible asset to the company, to babysitter. I wish I was joking. The boss is a guy who has never worked for anyone except his mommy, who owns the company. This guy is someone who will one day take over the company, who currently can't even figure out Bluetooth. Moron would be a compliment. Last phone call I had from him was him asking where he was. No, I'm serious. Hey, I'm driving. Where am I? He asks me to track his phone, find his location, see if I can find a store near him that sells a certain item, and then I am to GPS voice navigate him there using his phone to tell him when to turn. This is my life. 50 phone calls a day from this man. I no longer do my regular job. I've been transitioned into this personal assistant role, even though I did not want it. The company is losing money. Boss is supposed to be figuring out why, but the guy can't even pour himself a cup of coffee from the machine we've had for 6 years. In my day-to-day, I also assist other departments. I have access to various software. I work alongside multiple managers and assist with their projects as well. Based on my observations, I found several problems that are costing us money. Either by purchasing, distribution, or just a general lack of adequate price adjustments. Some were serious enough that I even spoke to a different department manager, who was impressed and took me to the CEO to ask if I can be moved to their department to help fix some of the identified problems. CEO is the boss's mother. I get told that I absolutely am not allowed to transfer. That I am far too valuable as a personal assistant to be shared with other departments. That boss will handle and oversee the changes that need to be made. Manager and I were stunned. Turns out, mother wants to step away from the company and wants boss to run it. That boss just needs more projects to work on to get a better understanding of how to run the company. Boss gets called in, told that I identified several issues and that boss needs to get them resolved. Boss gets mad at mother, telling her he doesn't have time to do that. Mother says she understands that he is a very busy boy. Boss later calls me into his office, and tells me that I am to work on fixing all of these issues, but that I'm to give him all my notes, tell him how I fixed it and he will present it to the board. Boss then proceeds to leave for the day, calling me later to ask what kind of mustard he liked the most on his deli sandwiches. Then proceeded to lecture me on mustard, because the answer I gave him was obviously not the right kind of mustard and that I need to pay more attention to things like that. I hung up the phone, picked up all my notes on this situation, and shredded them. Oops. Sorry. I'm too much of an idiot to handle doing any type of investigation work into our financial records for the past 5 years. I'm certainly too much of an idiot to notice that your profit margins went from 32% to less than 18.3% on the majority of our products we manufacture, all the while giving our distributors more than 46% discount so that they keep coming back for more. Here is hoping boss can figure that out, especially considering the layoffs we keep having. Excuse me while I make note of what kind of mustard he prefers on his Montreal smoked meat sandwich, which is a much more important use of my time. Because, in the words of boss, maybe one day you'll be capable, like me, if you keep working at it. I hope I get fired. What became of your school bully? Well, I've gone to school with this kid since 1st grade and I've always known he was a bad seed. Let's go down memory lane. He stole $20 from our 2nd grade teacher. He grabbed a girl's boobs in 4th grade and wondered why he got suspended. He was suspended in 5th grade for going into the school's computer lab and going to boobs.com. He lit a joint in the school bathroom in 7th grade. A teacher caught him and chased him down the hallway, and when he was caught, he said his name was Joe Johnson. His name was not Joe Johnson. He came to school one time in 10th grade with his eyebrows shaved off. According to rumor, he got intoxicated, passed out, and his friends shaved them off. In the middle of my AP English final in 11th grade, he stormed into my classroom and demanded to know if he was failing his class for the year. He wasn't in my class, no way he'd survive AP, the teacher told him he had a 70 for the year so he was just barely passing. He then said, "Thanks do," and left. After high school he got hired at my local grocery store. I saw him there for a few weeks and then never saw him there again. I then heard from a friend who works there that he got fired for stealing. How did he got caught? His drawer was $300 to $400 short after all of his shifts. He then got hired at a Jiffy Lube in my town. While working on someone's car, he stole the iPad that the owner had accidentally left in the back of her car. She used the Find My iPad app and traced it back to his house. He swore he had no clue how it got there. He bullied me pretty badly in elementary school. He always called me ugly and made me cry a few times. Then our junior year of high school he started texting me, I have no idea how he got my number, and asked me on a date. He was genuinely surprised when I turned him down. Then came the bank robbing incident. He's currently in jail for trying to rob our local bank. In his work uniform. With his name tag on. I found my brother eating a rat. My brother and I grew up very poor. We lived most of our life with our unstable mother and her broke, bummy boyfriend. Because my mother was unable to keep a steady job and was constantly getting fired or quitting, we barely had enough money for clothes and food. Her boyfriend wasn't much help either. He made a decent amount of money, but he would throw it all away on substances. When he did have money he would only spend it on himself, buying himself clothes and food, but not anything for my mom or for my brother and I. Our house was totally disgusting too. We had roaches and all other sorts of insects crawling around my house. There was mold all over the bathroom and the kitchen that was probably dangerous to be around. My mother was working late one night and her boyfriend was out of the house hanging out with his buddies. My brother and I were really hungry but there wasn't anything in the fridge or cabinets for us to eat. I was so hungry. I even considered eating pillow stuffing. My brother then had this bright idea to catch some of the roaches on the wall, cook them, and eat them. I was so desperate at this point I would have eaten anything. So we made a plan. I was going to catch the roaches in the kitchen and he was going to catch the roaches in the bathroom. Seemed like a pretty good plan. There were so many roaches that it would have taken us at least 10 minutes to catch a decent amount. Well, some time went by and I already cooked and ate my roaches. I noticed that I haven't heard from my brother in a while. I decided to walk to the bathroom and check up on him. I'm about to open the door when I start hearing squealing noises. I stood there for a few seconds confused as to what that sound could be. I opened the door and boom. It was my brother clawing his teeth into a fat, live rat. It was absolutely horrifying and disgusting. My transphobic mother hired a man to dress like Elvis Presley to convince me to detransition. I went no contact with my egg donor in 2021 after many attempts to get her to understand that I was trans, to get her to accept me and to get her to stop dragging me to church or having random pastors show up at my doorstep getting me to repent for my sins. She actually did this, by the way. So last night I was at work and get a call with my dead name, telling me how I'm getting a package from my egg donor. The call is sketchy, the man vague about what the package is, and says that he'll be there at 11 the next morning. I proceed to have a panic attack in the kitchen. After calming down, I figure I should look at the package. If it's important information like details to my legal documents, I keep it. If it's a random gift, I'll donate it. So figure me surprised when instead of a package I open my front door too, but a man in a red shoulder cape, greased hair, sunglasses indoors and a big effing acoustic guitar. For reference, I live in a very small building, resulting in small cramped hallways with thin doors that every neighbor can hear through, so imagine my horror when he starts singing loudly at 11 a.m. My wife bails as second-hand embarrassment is something she struggles with greatly and stands on the balcony in mild horror as I'm glued in place as a love song is sung to me. I think it was a Elvis song. Fits in theme. When it finally settles in that I live in a clown world I close my eyes and just let it happen. This guy's getting paid to do this, whatever. He finishes and what comes out of his mouth next floors me. He said, you know you shouldn't give up your want to see your egg donor. She has different views than you have to respect that. I responded with confusion because it came out of nowhere. He then proceeds to tell me that egg donor loves me and that contact is the most important thing, and that family is family and there's no replacing it. I tried to be polite and tell him it's none of his effing business, but he continues. How old are you? 20? I corrected him with my age, which was a horrible idea because he then launches into another preach about his 26-year-old and family is family. I was in hell. Luckily my wife finally got over her cringe and stepped back into the hallway. He asks her if she's my sister, to which I say she is and that we F daily. I proceed to tear up the paper he gave me as my wife laughs until she nearly pukes. This is why the Israel-Palestine situation will have more of an effect than you think. Because the current Israel-Palestine conflict will have a turmoil snowball effect on other wars and conflicts happening around the globe. Think of it this way, while many countries and committees spend their time trying to decide justice and whom to allocate money to, that is time lost for help in the Ukraine-Russia war. This will cause thousands more to die while the battle is postponed. Moreover, Iran will have to join in this conflict, which will immensely change the grounds and possibility for Azerbaijan to try and take over Armenia. Already Azerbaijanis have unrightfully stepped foot and taken claim on Armenian ground, but without a local partner, and more attention going to another war, the effects could be disastrous. There is much worse that can happen though, but before we can talk about the future effects we have to understand the history, so here it is. The Jews had lived in ancient Israel until various empires conquered and expelled them. Each time they were allowed to return. The last iteration of that was the Roman Empire, which first started to conquer the province of Judea in 63 BC. The Jews had a belief that there was only one God, Yahweh, and that to worship any other god was a sin. The Romans had a political practice to impose the Roman emperor as a god to worship. For the other regions they conquered where the people there believed in multiple gods, this wasn't too big of an issue. However, I'm sure you can see why this is an issue for the Jews. Tensions kept rising. The Jews fought several wars of independence, which partially received renewed vigor through Jesus' preachings and activities, but the Jews didn't have a chance against the mighty Roman Empire. Eventually the Romans got fed up and started to expel the Jews from Judea, a process that took the span of several decades starting roughly in 100 AD. This was the final time it happened. During medieval times. Fast forward to the 600s AD. In the Arabian Peninsula, the Prophet Muhammad receives a vision from God and founds the religion of Islam. Over the course of the following decades, the Arabs conquer vast swathes of North Africa and the Middle East, slowly converting these populations to Islam and Arabizing their cultures and peoples. We have three religions that now share the same root. They trace back their spiritual lineage to Abraham, a key religious figure in the Torah, the Bible, and the Quran. Meanwhile, Jews living in the now Christian kingdoms of Europe are excluded from many professions and crowded into small corners of cities called ghettos or plots of undesirable rural land called shtetls. At best they would be tolerated, at worst they would be expelled and massacred. In the 1600s, two large Jewish populations eventually made their way to two places, the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, or the area of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, modern-day Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, and the Baltics. These Jews are called the Sephardic and Ashkenazim Jews respectively. There are also Mizrahi Jews in the Muslim world that experience similar treatment. They'd sometimes be accepted and sometimes would be persecuted. Industrial era. After the French Revolution and the defeat of Napoleon in 1815, Europe started to experience a surge in nationalist movements. No longer were people subjects of a king, they now saw themselves as citizens of a country. But this also meant that many people saw that their countries were only for their own people. France was only for the French, Russia was only for the Russians, etc. Anti-Semitism and hatred against Jews intensified during this time, especially in the former Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which had been split between Russia, Austria, and Prussia, the predecessor state to Germany. In France there was the Dreyfus Affair, in which a French Jewish army officer was wrongly accused of treason and put on trial. In Russia, the Jews that lived in Eastern Europe were routinely expelled by the Russian Tsars, in which the Russian secret police would go to select villages and towns to terrorize the Jewish populations there and expel them in events known as pogroms. A lot of Jews, especially Ashkenazim Jews, immigrated to the U.S., Britain and its colonies, or Latin America to escape persecution. However, one Jew named Theodor Herzl had an idea: instead of being outsiders in a country constantly at the majority's mercy, what if the Jews had their own country? What if they could reclaim the promised land of Judea that had been taken from them so long ago? In the 1880s, he forms a movement to return to the promised land, Zionism, and organizes voyages and settling expeditions to Judea, called Aliyahs, now the province of Palestine in the Ottoman Empire. At first, this wasn't an issue. But as more Jews came, and as the Arabs also had nationalist movements to establish a free nation from the rule of the Ottoman Turks, the Arabs and Jews started to slowly come to a head. The World Wars. The Ottoman Empire joins World War I in 1915 on the side of Germany, Central Powers, who are fighting the UK, France, and Russia, the Entente. Britain owns Egypt at this time, so a war front begins there. The British and French start sponsoring an Arab rebellion against the Ottomans. The Entente powers promise the Arabs that they will have their own country if the Entente wins the war. The Central Powers lose the war and the Ottoman Empire is carved up in a peace treaty. However, the British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour makes a public declaration in 1917 that Britain would support a Jewish state in Palestine. The British and French also have a secret agreement called the Sykes-Picot Agreement, in which they would divide the Ottoman territories of the Middle East amongst themselves. The British essentially promised Palestine to the Arabs, the Jews, and themselves, making a promise they couldn't keep. The Arabs are understandably pissed and feel betrayed. They start launching a rebellion against the British and the French, but this rebellion is crushed. Meanwhile, Jews hear the Balfour Declaration and are excited to believe that the British support their claim to the Promised Land, so they start immigrating to the now British Mandate of Palestine in large numbers. This is especially important since the US, Brazil, and many other countries start closing off their countries to Jewish immigration. The Arabs see this as a colonialist ploy to replace the Arab population in Palestine with a loyal Jewish population, and so start fighting with the Jews that are settling in Palestine. Multiple violent conflicts break out over the 1920s and 1930s, heightened by both Jews and Arabs forming their own militias. In 1936, the violence in Palestine is too much for the British to handle, so they close off Palestine to further Jewish immigration to appease the Arabs. At the same time, Germany has elected the Nazis into power. Nazi Germany starts World War II and starts conquering vast swathes of Europe. Jews are desperately trying to flee, but no country will take them and Jewish refugees are sometimes deported back into Nazi hands. When the Nazis invade the Soviet Union and conquer vast portions of Eastern Europe, they suddenly control land where many Jews live and decide to implement the Holocaust in full. Eventually, Nazi Germany is defeated, but the Nuremberg trials display these crimes for the world to see. However, the Jews are convinced that Europe will never accept them, especially since pogroms are still happening in Europe after the war. So now that we know that we can clearly see that this isn't very black and white, obviously this attack from Israel has unalived people and therefore cannot be characterized as anything but wrong. However, we can't decisively make wrong or right claims because it is a very complicated situation. What do you think? I unintentionally caused a war between my family and my brother's wife's family with one innocent text message. So my brother's wedding happened 2 days ago, and it turned into a complete chaos, which I know even though I wasn't there. You might wonder why I didn't attend the wedding if it's my brother's. Well, it's because of his wife's family. He did send me an invitation to the wedding because he wanted me there, but his fiancée told him I couldn't attend because I had a boyfriend. You might be confused. But I'm a man. A bisexual man to be exact, and I have a boyfriend who I wanted to bring to the wedding. She said even though she doesn't have a problem with that and he doesn't have a problem with that, her extremely religious parents who already forced her to do the wedding in a church would most likely banish us from the wedding and cause trouble between our families. After she told him that my brother told me I couldn't attend and told me why, you might think I was angry. The truth is I was relieved. I hate going to big events with lots of people because of my social anxiety, and I already was used to not being able to attend certain events because of my sexuality, so it was nothing I haven't heard before. So the day of the wedding I stayed at home with my boyfriend. It's worth mentioning my parents apparently didn't know I wasn't attending the wedding. I was chillin' at home cuddling with my boyfriend when I suddenly got a text message from my parents asking me where I was, because they couldn't find me at the wedding party. I told them I wasn't attending the wedding and asked if my brother hasn't told them anything. They said no and asked me what happened. I didn't see any reason to lie, so I sent them a text message telling them exactly why. Now I have to admit I don't exactly know what happened after I sent them this message because they read it but didn't reply. And why did they care in the first place? They didn't notice I wasn't there before until the wedding was already over. They only noticed when the wedding party started. However, apparently my parents talked to my brother about it and all of a sudden my absence was the main topic of the wedding party. From what I heard, two fronts formed. On the one hand my parents and the rest of my family against the family of my brother's wife, and apparently he as a husband now felt compelled to take her side and tried to argue in her favor. It's crazy to think that I was just sitting at home living my best life with my boyfriend while all of that crap went down on his wedding. The wedding party was ruined and my brother appeared on my door angrily screaming at me, asking why I felt the need to ruin his wedding. I was confused and asked him what happened and he told me everything. I told him it wasn't my intention. I just told our parents what happened because they didn't know and wanted to know where I was and I thought he told them beforehand. He screamed at me that I ruined his wedding. I told him it's not my fault, he wasn't honest with them. I just respected their wish to not attend the wedding. I couldn't know it would go down like this because like I said, I couldn't attend several events before because of my sexuality and my parents never said anything about it, so I thought it would be the same thing here. But I gotta admit it's kinda sweet that my parents and the rest of my family stood up for me. They haven't done it before. That's a more than welcome change. But I still feel kinda bad because apparently I really ruined the wedding party. Update: so after my brother's visit, his wife and him went on their honeymoon. And the way the wedding party went might have been even worse than I imagined. What happens now is incredible. When I said in the main post that two fronts had formed, I only meant that metaphorically, of course, but it's no longer that. While nothing much interesting happened in the first 2 days afterwards, the terror started as soon as my brother and his wife went on their honeymoon. My mom and my dad visited me and told me how the wedding party escalated and they were so close to physical violence. I thought it was funny at first, but this truly bothers me. I also want to point that you did a great job at convincing me it's not my fault, but hearing my parents' side still gave me a bad feeling in my stomach. However, like I said, the terror started shortly after they went to their honeymoon. And when I say terror, I mean that my sister-in-law's family found both my Facebook and Instagram account and started spamming me with hateful messages. I received insults and hateful messages from various different accounts who all had one thing in common. They all had somewhat of a Christian theme and all of them had the same last name. So it wasn't hard to find out whose accounts it was. Mainly because I don't know my sister-in-law's family at all. I only know her and I know her parents were homophobic Christians. But whatever. They not only started attacking me, they also found the account of my boyfriend from my account because we're linked as a couple and started to send him the same messages. The messages contained on one side typical bigot stuff like, "You're burning in hell for your sins." One even called me and my boyfriend two devils in disguise. The other side were just blatant insults. You get the idea. I called my parents and told them what they are doing. Then I sent a text message to my brother with screenshots of the messages his wife's family sent me, to which he replied that I shouldn't disturb him with that during his honeymoon as I already destroyed his wedding party. I couldn't believe it. He was just like them. He did send me an apology after my mom told me she called him. But none of this is the main reason I'm giving you this update this early. Because I got a call this morning from an unknown number. I hesitated because I thought it was one of them. And I was right, but it was none of the people who insulted me. I heard a woman's voice who introduced herself as the half-sister of my brother's wife. She said it didn't go unnoticed what her family was doing and she wanted to apologize for them. I told her I'm not going to tell anyone in her family about this and that I don't blame her for her family's actions. She thanked me and hung up. I don't know why, but I have this feeling she only did this to protect her family from being reported. My mother wrote to me earlier that she wants to report the insults and the harassment of these people and that she demands for my brother to divorce his wife or she will disinherit him from her will because that's not how she raised him. A little radical in my opinion, but I understand where she's coming from. This entire thing escalated so much it's unbelievable. Update 2. It's been a few days. First of all, me and my boyfriend are fine. Luckily for us, they didn't go any further than their text messages. My mom filed a report against them. I don't know the current situation about that as I haven't filed the report myself. The reason I update you is a different one. First of all, one person in my sister-in-law's family is actually going to testify in my favor and against her family. It really takes courage to do so. It's the same person that called me in the last update. Somehow they found out that she is into women. No reason to hide it anymore. However, she said she's fine and is going to stay at a friend's house. I have so much respect for what she does. Imagine the strength you need to testify against your own family. I now feel bad for assuming she only called me to save her family from being reported. More importantly, what is the current situation with my brother? Well, my mom talked to him and told him to leave his wife or she will disinherit him from her will. He decided to stay with his wife and my mom made her threat come true. He's no longer in her will. My father did the same. When I visited them, I also told them that I wish that this entire situation went different. They assured me it's not my fault, but I feel like if it wasn't for me then my family wouldn't be ripped apart like this. Haven't talked to my brother since then. My boyfriend feels similar. He also told me he kinda feels responsible for all this chaos. I assured him it's not his fault, but honestly I wasn't even sure if I could say this in my position. On the other hand, it was my sister-in-law's family's bigotry that ruined everything, and everything would have been fine if I could have just attended. But now it's time for me to grow distant to this situation. We see what the report will do. I followed your advice to document everything. The insulting and harassing messages continued until 2 days ago. So I have much to say about them. Unfortunately, homophobia is still very much normalized in our society. I already said it in a post in my profile, but the reason I'm so calm and casual about the situation is the simple fact that I'm used to situations like this. They don't get to me anymore. If I let any insult get to me, I wouldn't make it for a long time. It's a coping mechanism. I've been into situations where I was sent to the hospital because I kissed my boyfriend in public. So insults and harassment like theirs is nothing I haven't seen before. Final update. So last time I told you my mother was pressing charges against them, and to my surprise we won. They weren't going to jail or anything, but they had to pay for their actions. Literally. There was one incident where my sister-in-law's dad was actually trying to find out where I lived and asked my brother who told him. Only God knows what he would have done to us if we still had lived there. But in the time span of the last 2 months, me and my boyfriend moved to a different place which my brother didn't know anything of. Also, their social media accounts were deleted. However, I don't know if this was part of their punishment or if they did it themselves. My mom has also carried out the threat towards my brother and disinherited him from her will. After he came back from his honeymoon, he begged her to put him in again. She said only if he apologized to me. She invited me and my boyfriend over, and my brother sat in the living room with this mad look on his face. She made him apologize, but I didn't accept this apology because I could tell it wasn't sincere. He did it because he had to and not because he was actually sorry. I told my brother that I am disappointed in him for who he became. Before that we had this huge bond, usually never judged each other for stuff like this, and all of a sudden he has such a problem with me having a boyfriend. I just don't get it. I told him that I miss the old him. He didn't respond to anything. He just sat there quietly staring at the bottom. After I finished, he just got up and left. This was the last time I spoke with him, and it's already been a few weeks since this happened. My parents paid much more attention to the discrimination I face since this incident. They wanted to learn more about the problems I face as a queer person. I really love them. My dad even got a bisexual pride flag for me and asked if he could hang it in our bedroom. I love that I have such great parents. I just wished for my brother to become the person he once was. By the way, since the case with my sister-in-law's family is over, I didn't heard anything about their lesbian daughter. She supported us during the process, but we lost contact afterwards, and I just hope she's fine. New update. The final update of my story happened 6 months ago, and I figured some of you might be interested in how things are currently going. There have been some things that happened. First of all, I want to give you an update about the sister of my brother's wife. Around 2 months after my update, she texted us and asked if she could come over. We talked for a while, and I was relieved to find out that she is fine. She said that she moved in with her girlfriend when the case was over, simply because her parents and the rest of her family had disowned her and threatened her with physical violence if she dares to return. However, the relationship with her girlfriend ended after a while, and she asked us if she could stay for a few days until she found something. She stayed with us for 2 weeks. During that time, my parents had visited us and offered her to stay with them because they had a big house with some free space. She stays there currently because she wanted to study, and my parents had no problem with letting her stay a little longer. Me and my boyfriend also help her out financially a little bit. We included her into several different celebrations such as Christmas and New Year's Eve, and I feel like she is the sister I never had. What's probably more interesting for you is how my brother is currently doing. The truth is, I don't know exactly. We haven't talked since the apology. However, he actually tried to attend our Christmas celebration party, but the moment he appeared, my dad kicked him out and said that, and I quote, "This homophobic rubbish is no longer allowed in my house." I love him. Oh, by the way, of course, both went through with disowning him. My boyfriend and I are still together, and I feel like he might be the one I want to marry. This entire situation made our bond so much stronger. I plan on proposing to him, but there are so many ideas floating around in my head for the proposal that I can't really decide which one. Also, the social media accounts of my sister-in-law's family had disappeared entirely. All of them, but I assume they already made new ones under a new name. I'm just glad all of this is finally over. I don't have any compassion left for my brother. I just wish he had never developed this way. Everything that happened to him, he brought it on himself. If you guys want, I can update you when I'm engaged. Thanks for reading. Wish you all the best.
My pregnant sister-in-law treats me as her personal maid. Then she got a complete mental breakdown when I refused to babysit her baby. It all started when Jack and Rachel got pregnant. Their lease almost ended, and my parents invited them to stay at our house. The day they came, Jack asked me why I hadn't yet moved out of my room. I was confused, and he told me that he and Rachel would be in my room, so I went to the guest room. I refused, but my parents got mad, and we fought. I lost and ended up in the much smaller guest room. Then Rachel had a problem with my cooking. I ate scrambled eggs with mozzarella and avocado daily for breakfast, and she couldn't stand the smell. She asked me to stop, but I refused. My parents got involved, and I had to stop. There were problems with other food, too, and I had to stop cooking them. I was told I must be more accommodating cause she was pregnant. That is my problem. Rachel started to boss me around. We were alone for 8 hours while my parents and Jack worked. She thought I would be her maid. I refused. She threw a temper tantrum, like always, and I again had a big fight with Jack and my parents. I was told that she had a high-risk pregnancy and was on bed rest, and I'm an a-hole for not helping her. I told Jack that he had knocked her up. It was his responsibility. I stood my ground, and in the end, Rachel's cousin came to help her sometimes. Then Rachel gave birth to my nephew. I congratulated them when they came home, and that was it. I don't like babies, so I mostly keep for myself now. But that doesn't stop Rachel from asking for favors. Please watch the baby while I take a quick shower. Please watch it while I make myself some food, etc. I always refuse, and we all have new fights repeatedly. Last Friday, it all came to a head when she asked me to watch my nephew while she went to the pharmacy for baby formula. I refused. She got mad and we fought. She grabbed her purse to go anyway, and I told her that the moment she walked out that door, I would call the police for child abandonment. I was serious, and she knew it. She broke down and screamed what a horrible human being I am. Then she ran to her room. She had a complete mental breakdown. We had the most significant fight when Jack and my parents came home. Jack accused me of hating Rachel and my nephew, among other things. I told him I refused to bond because they would weaponize him against me. My parents told me enough is, that they can't believe they raised such a selfish human being and that either I help or I move out. I'm thinking of the second option. Am I the a-hole? Edit. I work from home and pay 50% of all household expenses, including mortgage. Jack and Rachel don't contribute anything to costs. The Barbie movie made me realize I hate my friends. They're just pick-me's. This is petty, but there's a lot of build-up to this. I am a very sensitive person who gets really excited by things like events, movies, and friends. I never really expressed myself as a kid out of shame for being girly and crap. I've also always had friend issues. This year was really hard for me because of medical issues, social fallouts, and mental health issues. It's stupid, but one of the things that kept me going was seeing the Barbie movie. It was going to be the first time I dressed up with friends and made a big deal out of it. I just graduated and lost my best friend who I was originally going to see it with. We planned and joked about how to dress and when to go to get everything like the limited edition cups and stuff. It was stupid, but it was the first time I felt excited to go to something without being embarrassed. So I'd lost my best friend, but my remaining mutual friends said they'd go to me and we'd all have a ton of fun. For weeks we talked about it, and I expressed my excitement and everything, and they really bantered back. I bought the tickets that my friend asked me to get as well for cheaper times. The day of the movie though, everyone showed up late, nobody was dressed up or had any pink, and when I brought out the pink decor for my boyfriend to wear, he rolled his eyes at me. What's worse is the tickets were for the maternity showing, so there were babies crying throughout the whole thing. Afterward, I found out that the friend who asked me to buy the tickets knew and didn't say anything. Every time I've hung out with my friends since, I've just felt so disconnected and defeated. It's stupid, but that movie meant a lot to me, and I really feel like I have no hope left for anybody.
Today I messed up by realizing my husband and I have been miscommunicating for years. Today I, 29 male, was talking at lunch with my husband, 33 male, and we went over the same subject we have unsuccessfully talked about for years. Please note that we have known each other for almost 10 years, lived together 5 years, and have been married almost 3 years. So we were talking about dogs and cats, and he said that cats are pretty good. Now pay attention to that wording because that's the bit where we messed up. Over the years I had been disheartened when he said things were pretty good. From my perspective, he seemed to be emotionally distant and unenthusiastic about things. Everything was pretty good, and said in a very mild tone of voice, so over the years we tried to talk about it with limited success. Today when I asked him why he never seemed to show much enthusiasm for things, he was confused as always. He said that he did show enthusiasm because he likes cats, but you just said they were only pretty good. This confused him even more. Somehow I managed upon the magic combination of words to get him to elaborate further. Usually, he would just repeat that things are pretty good, but today he managed to lay out his scale. Okay, good, pretty good, great. I have never seen pretty good used in that place in the scale. I always place it below good, almost good, mostly good. For years we had been talking about things and I had assumed he was sorta on them because of this. I had to run damage control at a Thanksgiving dinner one time because he said my mom's cooking was pretty good. We have stopped watching TV shows because I thought he was only mildly enjoying them and I didn't want to be too much of a bother. I eventually just came to the conclusion that he wasn't very expressive and tried to place his responses in my own scale because he had such difficulty explaining it. I got disheartened when he said my dog was pretty good. He calls me pretty cool. When I told him about my scale he was shocked. He says it must be a southern thing, though I don't remember it from when I lived in Texas. We compromised and said it must be an Arkansas thing, his home state. We both began re-examining our interactions over the years. The Thanksgiving dinner, me explaining to my brother that, no, my husband did really like that movie, he just expresses it this way, how he talks about my dog, all of it. When lunch was over and I assured him everything was okay, he said I was pretty cool and got this horrified look on his face. He realized that from my perspective he had been calling me only mostly cool, good, etc. For years, I similarly realized I had been assuming he wasn't enthusiastic about things because of the wording. It was so embarrassing. I've encouraged him to be more open about his feelings and his happiness and just confusing him for years. I'm just so baffled by everything. It's good we're learning to communicate better, but geez, he feels really apologetic now, and I've tried to assure him that I just assumed it was like a jokey understatement meant to be kind of funny and maybe razz me a little, but no, he was entirely sincere the whole time. We're trying to find better ways to communicate, but it's a process. He has encouraged me to ask him what do you think that means as a way of getting him to rephrase some of the things he says. Hopefully we can cut down on miscommunications like this in the future.
Okay Reddit, what are some clever questions asked by cops to get you in trouble? I had a cop pull this devious tactic on me at a checkpoint. So, he's asking the usual questions. Where are you coming from? Work. Where are you going? Home. How long have you worked there? Etc. etc. And then he suddenly gets all casual and says, well, if you were drunk, you sure fooled me. I know to be careful what I say to a cop, because of the tricks they use, so just to be safe I didn't say anything. Just looked at him. He looks away for a second, says something else and then goes right back and says the exact same line. Well, if you were drunk you sure fooled me. At that I knew something odd was going on, so I asked him if we were done and could I leave. At that he let me go. Later, after trying to figure out what that was all about, I realized if I had said anything to the affirmative, yes, or even nodded, it would be as if I said yes, I am fooling you, I am drunk. In my opinion, a pretty despicable way to get someone to unknowingly admit guilt to something they may not even be guilty of.
I cheated on my husband because I thought he cheated first. I met my husband at a friend's home party and connected almost immediately. Even the first time I met him he was incredibly handsome, very confident and charming. I knew several of the girls wanted to talk to him when we were there, but within the first 10 minutes of arriving at the party, he came over to me. I felt almost chosen by him. We started dating a few days after, and the more time we started spending together, the more I started to fall for him. I have always had the feeling of him being completely out of my league, but meeting him never really made me feel unsure that he wanted to be with me. I knew beforehand he had been with plenty of women, but it didn't really bother me because he never spoke of it or ever mentioned it. The few times I asked him if he really wanted a relationship or if he was sure about us, he always told me he loved me and that he does not care about other women. After 2 years, we ended up getting married. We tried having a child, got a beautiful son, and we were planning on having another child. I love my husband more than anyone can imagine, but after giving birth I gained a bit of weight. He always told me he didn't care and that he loved me no matter what. He suggested I could start training with him. He goes to the gym 4 times a week, and that we could start this as an activity together. I always said yes, but we never ended up going together for several different reasons. He never got out of shape and regularly went training in the gym without trying to invite me there. As time moved on and the baby was taking most of our time, our intimacy life became non-existent, but he always assured me that he was still attracted to me. Most of the time he would try to initiate intimacy, but I would turn it down, mostly because of myself. I was insecure about my body and myself around him. This is still a huge regret for me. He even told me we could leave the baby at our parents', his or mine, to get alone time, but for some reason I kept neglecting him. My self-esteem kept getting worse and worse, but he was trying to cheer me up and encourage me. When we would go out somewhere, I could see other women looking at him or trying to make eye contact with him. It would bother me and I would tell him about it, but he would assure me he only loved me. One day as he came home from work, he went straight to bed telling me he was exhausted. I snooped around on his phone, looking at his messages on all social media platforms. I could see several chats with different women, some of whom I know are his ex-girlfriends. He had been asked to go meet for a coffee, or if they would want to meet up somewhere just as friends, but he always turned them down. I even saw archived messages of an ex who had messaged him out of the blue and asked if he wanted to meet up for good times, which is referring to intimacy. He had responded with "I have a wife" and blocked her. I really don't know why, but in my head I started making up that he must have been cheating on me with at least one of these girls. I ended up contacting an ex-boyfriend who I hadn't talked to for years. One thing led to another and we met up at a hotel close by. At first I just wanted some sort of payback, but as we ended up having intimacy I was filled with incredible regret. This all happened during the day when my husband was at work and had no idea. It took me 3 days to break down and tell him everything. He just kept looking at me but didn't say a single word, went upstairs, and locked the door to our bedroom. I followed him and was crying at the door, but he didn't say a single word to me. It took him a long time, but he finally came out, only to immediately leave the house. I haven't heard a single word from him. He didn't even say anything to me when leaving and was not even looking at me. I have tried to call him hundreds of times, but he still hasn't responded and I have no idea where he has gone. I am scared to contact his or my own family because I am scared that they will find out. Please, I really don't know what to do and just want to save my marriage. I have an incredible feeling of disgust, regret, and I don't even know why I didn't trust him. I know most of this roots down in my own insecurities, but I just want my husband back. He has left me alone with our baby. How can I get in contact with him? What can I do to save my marriage? Update: my life is completely ruined. I hate myself more than anything and just wish I can get my husband back. He came home for a few hours yesterday before packing up and leaving again. When he finally came home, he didn't say anything, went straight to our son, and refused to say a word to me even though I kept crying. He told me he wanted some alone time with our son. I begged him to stay and to talk about it. I was being completely transparent and told him I would tell him everything he asked, but he just stood up, looked at me in a disgusted, cold way and told me, "I don't want to know anything. I know all that I need to know." Then he just went over and took some more things to put in the bag. I completely panicked and started saying I love him and will do anything to get him back. I confessed that I had stopped the intimacy midway because I felt guilty. In the middle of that sentence he pushed me to the wall and held my arm and screamed, "I told you to shut the F up." I have never seen him so angry and disgusted. For a moment I thought he would hit me, but he never did. I tried to hug him but he refused to touch me. He told me I am used and broken to him now. He wants nothing to do with me. This completely broke me inside. I asked what this meant and he said we will be getting divorced. The only thing he wants right now is to be able to meet our son whenever he wants, but other than that he wants nothing to do with me. Later the same night, he called me on the phone and told me he will be contacting a lawyer because he wants a divorce. I don't know what will happen now. I have been crying constantly since this all happened. I am having panic attacks and I can't eat or sleep. He saw me completely broken but he still wants nothing to do with me and wants a divorce. I have so much remorse I almost feel a constant pressure in my chest and as if I am having cramps in my stomach. I still haven't been able to contact our families and I don't know if he has either. I am too embarrassed to do that. I just want my life back. I really can't imagine seeing a life without him or him being with another woman. My life has crashed into 1,000,000 pieces and I am just trying to pick them up and glue them together. Is there anything I can do? I want to die but can't for the sake of my son.
My mom cheated on my dad, and I get why. So back when I was teen it was discovered that my mom was carrying on an affair with another man. My dad ended up forgiving my mom and moving forward together. I held resentment for my mom for a real long time because how dare she do that to my dad. Hindsight is 20/20 though. Well, now as I am an adult, pushing 30, I can see their relationship for what it is. My dad is a great dad, absolutely wonderful, although I can see the misogyny from how he was raised at that period of time. As a husband and partner, I can see how lousy he is. My mom is basically his mom too. She does all the cleaning in their house. He can't be bothered to even wash a dish or clean up after himself. My mom does it all. The mental load. She takes it all, keeping track of groceries they need for the next shopping trip. She's in charge of paying all the bills, cooking the meals. Oh, and she still has to work her regular job full time. 45 plus hours a week. My dad's health isn't the greatest, so my mom has also become his nurse when he is ill, managing the myriad of his medications and general health. Also, she cares for my grandma as she is sick too with a couple diseases, so on top of everything she does, she manages grandma's health too, all without a thank you or you're appreciated. This past Christmas put everything into perspective. My mom coordinated with my siblings to all go in on a super expensive gift for him for Christmas. An item he really wants. The effort he put into her gift, zero. He got her absolutely nothing. I spoke to him privately prior to gift exchange about what he got my mom, claiming, well, I buy her nice anniversary and birthday gifts. Isn't that enough? I see the disappointment my mom feels on her face and it hurts me. She doesn't get just because flowers from him. It's like he sees her as just a person to take care of him at home. This has been their whole relationship, not just after the affair, but prior to it too. So although I absolutely do not condone cheating, I can understand why she did what she did back then. I get sad thinking of my mom and how she takes care of everyone, but the person who is supposed to take care of her doesn't do that. I catch myself thinking occasionally, they should really just get divorced. I have learned over the years to really cherish my mom, so even if he doesn't spoil her, I do. Take her on mini weekend trips. We go to out-of-town concerts together. I try to buy her small just thinking of you gifts so she can feel appreciated and loved. I refuse to let my fiance's male best friend be her maid of honor. And now she's staying with her parents. I 26 male proposed to my girlfriend 24 female of 6 years last month. She obviously said yes. And we've been working on wedding details like save the dates and invitations, venue, caterer, etc. We got to talking about who we would want in our wedding because she wanted to do a special proposal to her side of the wedding court, and she said she wanted to have her best friend since childhood be her maid of honor. The thing is, her childhood best friend is a guy 24 male. They lived on the same street when they were kids and have been friends since. My fiancé and I met in college and her friend was there too. So I've known him for as long as I've known her. At first I didn't really like him because he was always hanging around her. But after she and I started dating and I was forced to be around him more, I kind of started to tolerate him. He and my fiancé saw each other a lot, but he and I have never really hung out one-on-one before. One time when we were left alone together, he tried to get all tough and did that. If you ever break her heart, I swear. Corny threat talk. He's a small dude, so it made me laugh more than intimidate me. After that, I got the feeling this was a situation where he liked her, but she didn't know. I asked my fiancé if she and him ever had feelings for each other, and she said no. Then let me know he was gay. I'm not homophobic or anything, so it's not like I don't want him in the wedding because of that. It's just that I think it would be better if her side of the party was all girls. She and him already did everything together, not including him in our wedding. Wouldn't hurt their friendship. I told her that and she got defensive, saying that if I could have a girl in my side of the party, the girl being my older sister who practically raised me, she could have a guy. I said that it was a different circumstance and that I wouldn't allow her best friend to be her man of honor. She got really mad and said it was her wedding too, then stormed out. I got a text from her sister a few hours later saying she had gone to her parents' house and told them what I had said. They thought I was being a jerk because I never liked her friend and I'm threatened by him. I've tried to talk to my fiancé since she left, but she hasn't returned my calls or texts. I really love her and I don't want to lose her. I just don't want her best friend to be a part of our day. Am I in the wrong here? Edit. It's come to my attention. In a previous comment, I made that I have created the world's thinnest argument. I said that my fiancé was unwilling to compromise on things too, such as the groom's men's neck pieces and blazers, and as such I was in the right to be unwilling to compromise about her best friend. I stated in a few other posts that there were other things she didn't want to compromise on, and someone suggested I make a list. So here it is. 1. When we were deciding our wedding date and location, she wanted to do it in spring in an open field. I wasn't on board with this as I have terrible allergies and spring is when it's at its worst. She shot down any alternative. I gave her alternatives being things done closer to summer or in summer and said it was spring or nothing. So we went with spring too. Instead of going with a DJ like I suggested who could play a mix of her favorite, my favorite and general upbeat dance music. She said that she really wanted a live band. It specialized in her favorite genre. I asked if we could just give the DJ a longer list of her songs and her favorite genre and tell them to pick from the list often. But she said no, and that a live band was going to be better. So we went with a band 3. In my culture, there are a few traditional wedding ceremonies that I wanted us to partake in. Some included a kind of parade that leads the groom and his family to the bride's house, where they present her and her family gifts. A hair cutting ceremony. I made sure to tell her actual hair would not be cut. And finally, a knot tying ceremony where the guests wish us a long, happy marriage. She wanted absolutely nothing to do with these ceremonies and said they would be too much time and effort since it would be like having 2 weddings. I tried fighting for these more than the others, but she was firm on doing things traditionally. For she wanted the groomsmen to wear bow ties and blazers, even though I wanted the necktie and no blazer. Look. 5. She changed the color scheme from the originally agreed upon black, gold, maroon and forest green to pink, yellow, white and pastel blue, because the decorations would look better in the field. When I said we already printed invitations with the previous colors on them, she said we could throw those out and get reprints. Update the fiancé's point of view.
I 24 female, was recently engaged to my 26 now fiancé after 6 years together. We got into a fight a couple of days ago because he wouldn't let me ask my guy best friend, 24 male who I've known since we were kids, be my man of honor. I ended up walking out and went to stay with my parents for a few days. I told them what happened and they agreed that he was way out of line. I went back earlier today after I thought he had enough time to calm down. When I came home, he was glad to see me. He apologized for stepping out of line and I said it was fine and that we still had time to ask my best friend to be in the wedding. He kind of looked down, then said that we should call everything off. This really surprised me, and I immediately said no. He then admitted that while I was gone, he posted to Reddit about what had happened and that even though he was deemed the controlling jerk, he also realized that I was one because I had basically hijacked the wedding planning. I asked how he could think that, and he pointed out how I chose to have the wedding in spring, even though that's a bad time for him, and that I changed up the wedding color scheme and what his groomsmen would be wearing without talking with him first. I said that those were practically minor things and we didn't have to call off the wedding for it. Then he said I was insensitive for rejecting his culture's traditional wedding ceremonies and didn't even considering doing them. He had brought to my attention some traditional ceremonies people do at weddings in his culture, and while I appreciated him bringing it up to me, I decided against doing it because it wouldn't fit the vibe of the traditional wedding I wanted. I told him I only wanted to do a traditional American wedding and that he already agreed with me that that's what we were doing. Then he said that me having my guy best friend be my best man was untraditional. I pointed out I let him have his sister be part of his wedding party because he wanted some part of his family included, and that since he was breaking the tradition, so could I. He got really sad and looked like he was about to cry and said that me breaking the tradition was like a slap in the face after I rejected his traditions and that I just didn't respect his culture at all. That is not the case at all. I greatly respect his culture. I told him I understood how mean it sounded, but it's my wedding too, so I get a say in what we do. He kind of laughed and got up and said he wanted to take a break and left. I don't know what to do. I don't want to call off the wedding at all. I tried to find his Reddit post, but had no luck. I love him so much and I want to be with him for the rest of our lives. I don't know how we'll get through this.
What are some guy secrets girls don't know about? When people come crying to us, our first inclination is to fix the problem. If we tie down anything in the back of a pickup truck or trailer, it's physically impossible for us not to stand back and say that's not going anywhere. We really do think your hair is good. It looked good before and after you got a haircut. It looked good curly and it looked good straight. It looked good when you woke up and when you made it. As long as it's shaped like the hair we gave girls on stick figures when we were 5 years old, we think it looks good. I'm a girl and I've found out through the years that when guys say something, don't think too much into it, like what's the hidden meaning? Don't overthink it. Guys normally say stuff that should be taken at face value. The nod when you see a guy you don't know, or kind of know but don't really know well enough to talk to walks by, you give a subtle nod of your head, which they return. We desperately want you to toss us things instead of just handing them to us. I like hugs. I'm not staring at you, I'm zoned out thinking about how I'd start a brewery in medieval England whilst my eyes just happen to be facing your direction.
What's the most ridiculous way a coworker thought they could get away with something? Steve, a new person at work, it was about his second or third week, called in one morning to say that his grandma had died. He was told he could take some time off, and get back to us in a few days and let us know how he was doing. Soon afterwards, coworkers noticed that Steve had unfriended them on Facebook, all except for his line manager who, we can only presume, he forgot to unfriend. A few days later, Steve posted on Facebook, saying that he'd been robbed by a prostitute in Ibiza. When he returned to work, Steve was called into a meeting with the line manager, who opened with, "Sorry to hear about you getting mugged." By all accounts, it was a short meeting. Credit where credit's due. Steve didn't waste anyone's time trying to claim that the Ibiza trip had been an attempt to deal with his grief. Apparently, he owned up straight away that a friend of his had got cheap last-minute flights to Ibiza, and he'd made the dead granny up to get time off at short notice. He was still fired though. My boyfriend's sister refuses to stop touching him. My boyfriend has a sister a few years younger than us. His sister and mother have never liked me, but I just chalked it down to me being very alt-dressing and British, and them being fairly conservative and Iraqi. Over the years I've noticed my boyfriend's sister getting more visceral towards me and more touchy and clingy with him. She often hugs him and rubs and caresses him strangely, rubs his arms in an almost massaging way, leans against him while he's sitting down by putting her hands on his upper thighs, rubs her hands across his chest and will make comments like your hair smells so good or you are getting muscular now. The way she does these actions is very off-putting and she often makes derogatory comments towards me along the lines of, "He was mine before he was yours." I spoke to my boyfriend about it and he said he didn't think that much about it because it's his sister, but now that he thinks about it he does see my point of view. Our relationship has had some loyalty problems in the past which does plant seeds of doubt in my mind fairly often. He ended up talking to his sister about it while I was there and she ended up catching on to the fact that it was me who brought it up. Once she realized this she started screaming at me, "White trash, like you wouldn't understand how close real families are," as she put her hand on his upper manhood area to hold him back from walking towards me. I just walked out and my boyfriend followed about 5 minutes later. After this his mom started threatening to try and make him leave me and if he didn't she would make our lives hell. I decided to speak to my boyfriend immediately about everything and I made it clear that his family is purposely and knowingly tearing us apart and he is letting them. My boyfriend admitted he had got complacent because he tends to shut down in stressful situations. He assured me he was on my side and would rather keep distance between him and his family to be able to be happy with me. There was a lot of crying on both ends cause neither of us had really stopped to think about how much his family's hate was bringing